The suns were just beginning to rise over the dusty settlement of Koresh, casting long golden shadows across the cobbled streets. Merchants were lifting the shutters of their stalls, and the hum of life in the market district slowly grew. Among the crowd, 3 small alien children scurried forward, their bright blue-green skin gleaming faintly in the early light. They were brothers, Talon, Kiro, and Davi, and they often helped travelers haul goods to earn a few coins to bring home. That morning, they spotted a human stepping off a shuttle. He was tall, his clothing far cleaner and finer than most who passed through Koresh. The man's bags looked heavy, metallic cases stacked with the weight of wealth, and the brothers exchanged quick glances. Helping him could mean food for the entire week, perhaps even medicine for their ailing mother. The human looked around, scanning the crowd with a wary but curious gaze. Before he could hire one of the older porters, the 3 boys rushed up, tugging eagerly at the handles of his cart. Their small hands gripped the bars with surprising determination, and together they began pulling the load toward the main road. The man blinked in surprise but let them, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Careful with those," the human said, his voice firm but not unkind. "They're worth more than you realize." The boys nodded quickly, though they didn't understand every word. His tone carried respect, not scorn, and that was enough for them. They continued pulling, sweat forming on their brows as the cases rattled across the uneven stones. People in the market whispered as they passed. Most humans who came to Koresh dismissed the locals, treating them as lesser, fit only for menial tasks. But this traveler didn't shove the boys away or curse them. Instead, he walked beside them, sometimes steadying the cases when the cart threatened to topple. The sight was unusual enough to draw stares. As they reached the end of the market street, the human slowed and stopped. The boys let the cart rest, panting softly, but they kept their eyes fixed on him, waiting for his judgment. From his satchel, he withdrew a small pouch and crouched down to their level. He opened it and placed several gleaming credits into Talon's hand, far more than the task was worth. The boys froze, their wide eyes glowing with shock. It wasn't just generosity. This was a fortune by their standards, enough to buy food, new clothes, maybe even a proper bed for their mother. Their hands trembled as they clutched the coins, not knowing if they should return them out of fear. The human chuckled at their hesitation. "It's yours. You earned it," he said, enunciating carefully so they would understand. He ruffled Kiro's head gently, then turned back toward his shuttle. He didn't look back as he vanished into the crowd, leaving the boys rooted to the spot in stunned silence. They ran home as fast as their small legs could carry them, bursting through the tattered doorway of their dwelling. Their mother, weary and pale, sat near the fire with a cough that had worsened over the past weeks. She looked up in alarm as they dropped the coins into her lap, speaking over one another in their rush to explain. Her trembling hands picked up the credits, eyes glistening as realization dawned. They had never held so much wealth before. She asked again and again if they were certain it was not stolen. But the earnestness in her children's voices made her believe. For the first time in months, she felt a fragile hope stirring in her chest. That night, she cooked a meal heavier and richer than the boys had tasted in ages. They laughed and ate until their bellies were full, the sound of joy echoing faintly through the worn walls. Their mother watched them with tears in her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of thanks to whatever fate had sent that stranger their way. But as the fire burned low and the children drifted to sleep, she sat awake, staring at the pouch of remaining credits. Something about the man's actions lingered in her mind. Humans were not known for such generosity, especially toward her people. Why had he given so much? Why to her sons? Morning came swiftly, and with it a commotion outside their home. The sounds of voices, of footsteps, and of something heavy being set down in the dust. The mother hurried to the doorway, heart thundering. A crowd had gathered at the edge of the street, murmuring in disbelief, and there, standing in the center of it all, was the human from the day before. But this time he wasn't carrying his cases. Behind him stood a convoy of vehicles, crates stacked high with supplies and figures unloading them in neat rows. His gaze swept over the crowd before settling firmly on her. The mother's breath caught. She had no idea why he was here or what he intended, but she would soon find out that the simple kindness of her 3 sons had set in motion something far greater than she could imagine. The mother's hands shook as she clutched the doorway, her eyes darting between the human and the convoy behind him. The children had awakened and now clung to her legs, peering wide-eyed at the crowd. Whispers rippled through the villagers, some in awe, others in suspicion. Never had a human returned to Koresh with so much, and certainly not for one family. The human stepped forward, his expression calm but purposeful. He raised a hand and two of his companions pulled forward a crate, setting it at the family's doorstep. With a deliberate motion, he opened it, revealing food packs, medicines, and clothing sealed in protective cases. Gasps broke out among the onlookers as the mother staggered back, unable to believe what she was seeing. "You helped me yesterday," he said, speaking slowly so she could understand. "Now I return the kindness." His voice carried no arrogance, only sincerity. He pointed toward the three boys, then at the supplies. The meaning was clear. This was a gift, not a transaction. A gesture of gratitude far beyond what they could have ever expected. Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed her palms together in the gesture of thanks her people used. Her sons mimicked her, bowing their heads. The crowd stirred uneasily, some muttering that no human gave such things freely. But the sincerity in his stance, the calm way he stood without guards pointing weapons, silenced many of the doubts. The children rushed forward, their laughter bubbling as they examined the crates. Kiro lifted a sealed jar of medicine, his small hands trembling with excitement. For months they had begged healers who turned them away because they could not pay. Now the cure for their mother's illness sat within arm's reach. The relief on her face was almost too much to bear. The human spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Your children reminded me what decency is worth. Not wealth, not power, kindness." His words were not fully understood by most in the crowd, but his tone carried the weight of truth. The mother's tears spilled freely and she covered her mouth to muffle a sob, but kindness rarely came without consequences. A figure from the crowd stepped forward, his face twisted with suspicion. He was a village elder, known for his distrust of humans. "What do you want from us in return?" he demanded. The question sliced through the murmurs, and many turned to see how the human would answer. The man's gaze didn't waver. "Nothing," he said firmly. "But I will not lie, I see worth in your people. The galaxy sees only weakness, yet your children proved otherwise. They deserve more than scraps. I offer aid, and if you accept it, perhaps we can build something greater together." The villagers exchanged uneasy looks. Deals with humans had always led to exploitation, but this man's presence felt different. He hadn't sent soldiers to demand tribute, nor had he come to strip their resources. He had come with supplies, medicines, and sincerity. Still, doubt clung to the edges of their thoughts like a shadow. The mother stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Her voice shook but carried strength. "My sons helped you because it was right, not because they wanted reward. But what you have done here, it will save lives. I cannot turn away a gift that means survival." She bowed deeply, her children pressing close to her side. The crowd shifted, torn between caution and the undeniable proof laid before them. Hungry eyes lingered on the food crates. Desperate parents eyed the medicine. Slowly, a ripple of acceptance moved through them. Some began nodding, others raising their hands in cautious approval. The elder scowled but could not deny the truth. This was no ordinary human. The man smiled faintly, his eyes softening. He gave a small nod of respect toward the mother. "Then it begins here," he said. "With you. With them." He gestured again, and more crates were carried forward, shared among the villagers. The crowd pressed closer, their suspicion melting into gratitude as the weight of his generosity became impossible to ignore. The boys laughed as they watched strangers receiving food, medicines, and clothes. Unaware of how rare such generosity was, to them it felt natural, just as natural as they had helped him. Their mother, however, could not shake the feeling that fate itself had shifted beneath their feet. Something had been set in motion, something that would change Koresh forever. As the crowd dispersed with their newfound hope, the human lingered a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the family. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "I will return. There is more to be done." With that, he turned and left with his convoy, vanishing down the dusty road. The mother's heart pounded as she clutched her children close. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one truth with certainty. Her son's act of kindness had opened a door to a future none of them had ever imagined. The morning light poured into Koresh like liquid gold, but with it came a tension that clung to the air. Word of the humans' generosity had spread far beyond the village. carried by traders and travelers. By the time the convoy returned, a larger crowd had gathered, some curious, others wary, and a few openly resentful. It wasn't every day that a human brought wealth instead of chains. The mother stood in the doorway with her 3 sons, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. She could already sense the ripple of change sweeping through the community, and change was not always kind. Her neighbors had begun whispering about her family, some with admiration, others with jealousy. The credits, the food, the medicine, it all set them apart in a way that frightened her. When the human appeared once more, his steps confident but unguarded, the murmurs intensified. He greeted the children first, kneeling so that his eyes met theirs. Talon smiled nervously, while Kiro and Davi clung to his arms. They had no fear of him now, only trust, and the mother wondered if that innocence would be their undoing. Behind him, his companions unloaded strange equipment. They set up tall structures that shimmered with faint energy fields, and smaller devices that hummed softly when placed on the ground. The villagers gasped, recognizing technology far beyond their means. The elder pushed forward again, his expression grim. "What are you building here?" The human did not flinch. "Clean water," he answered simply, gesturing to the devices. "Your wells are poisoned. This will filter it. And those," he nodded to the towers, "will shield the settlement from storms. No more sickness. No more children dying." His voice carried across the square, steady and earnest. The villagers fell silent, their skepticism battling with hope. Mothers clutched their little ones closer. Men stared at the machines with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The elder sneered. "And what do you take in return?" "Our land, our loyalty. You seek to make us servants again." The man's jaw tightened, but his words were calm. "I ask nothing. Your children gave me help when I needed none. They reminded me of what my people have forgotten. This is not a transaction. This is a beginning." He turned to the mother then, his gaze softening. "They gave me kindness. I give it back." The crowd erupted in mixed voices, some praising him, others doubting. The mother felt the heat of their eyes burning into her back. She wanted to shrink into the ground, but her sons stood tall, as if proud to have been the spark of all this. She realized then that whether she wanted it or not, their family had become a symbol. As the day wore on, the machines began to work. Clear, pure water flowed from spouts into waiting jars, and the people cheered. The sick were given medicine, the hungry were fed. Gratitude softened suspicion, but jealousy still festered beneath the surface. The elder's eyes never left the human, watching with a predator's patience. That night, the mother sat by the fire with her children, listening to their chatter. They spoke of the human as if he were a hero from an old tale, their eyes shining with wonder. She stroked their heads, but her heart ached with unease. Heroes, she knew, often brought as much destruction as they did salvation. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. When she opened it, the human stood there, alone, holding a small case. "This is for you," he said, handing it over. Inside were medical tools, far more advanced than anything the village had ever seen. "For your people, for you. You know them better than I do. You must lead this." She shook her head in disbelief. "I am no leader," she whispered. But he only smiled faintly. "You are now. 'Cause they trust you, and trust is worth more than power." His words lingered in the silence long after he left, leaving her trembling under their weight. The next day, she awoke to the sound of voices outside. A larger crowd had gathered, demanding her presence. When she stepped into the sunlight, her neighbors looked at her not as a widow with 3 sons, but as something more. Someone tied to the future of Koresh. The elder glared at her, but the others, many of them, looked with hope. Her children clung to her hands, their small faces alight with pride. She realized then that she could not walk away. Whatever fate awaited them, they were bound to it now. The kindness of 3 boys had rippled outward, and she was standing at the heart of a storm that was only beginning. The morning broke with a restless energy that swept through Koresh like a storm. The villagers had gathered again, drawn by the steady stream of miracles pouring from the humans' convoy. Pure water gushed from the filters, healing plants sprouted in nutrient beds, and the sick were slowly recovering. Yet for all the wonder, an undercurrent of unease still rippled beneath the surface. Gratitude and suspicion were locked in battle, and everyone seemed to know that something had to give. The mother stood in the square with her sons, her gaze flicking between the human and the villagers. She could see the fear in some eyes, the longing in others. The elder moved through the crowd like a shadow, whispering venom into willing ears. He fed their doubts, warning that all gifts carried hidden chains. She wanted to deny him, but deep down, she shared a fragment of his fear. The human approached her again that day, this time not with crates or machines, but with words. "Your people don't trust me yet," he said quietly, his eyes steady. "But they trust you. They need a voice who can guide them into what comes next. You can be that voice." The weight of his request pressed on her chest until it was hard to breathe. She shook her head, but her sons gripped her hands tighter. "Mother," Talon said softly, "you always tell us kindness must be answered. Isn't this the same?" His innocent eyes filled with belief pierced her heart. She realized that whatever fear she held, her children's hope was stronger, and she could not betray that. That evening she stood before the gathered crowd. Her voice wavered at first, but as she spoke, strength crept into her words. She reminded them of the sickness that had taken their children, of the poisoned wells, of the hunger that stalked their homes. Then she gestured toward the flowing water, the full bellies, and the laughter of children playing again. "This was not bought with our chains," she said, "but with kindness returned. If we let fear blind us, we will throw away the chance to live." The people murmured, their doubt cracking under the truth of her words. Mothers nodded through their tears, and fathers lowered their heads in shame. Yet the elder's voice cut through the calm like a blade. "You would lead us into the hands of humans again," he shouted. "You speak of hope, but I see only a leash. You will bind us with your weakness." His followers cheered, but the crowd no longer surged fully to his side. The human did not argue. He stepped back, letting the people decide for themselves. The mother felt every eye upon her, the air heavy with choice. Then, from the back of the crowd, a child lifted a jar of clear water, shouting with innocent joy. Laughter spread and the tension broke. The villagers began to cheer, not for the human, but for the life they saw returning to their community. The elder's face twisted with fury, but he could do nothing as the tide turned against him. His words, once sharp as knives, now fell dull against the wall of renewed hope. The mother saw his retreat and knew this battle was not over. But she also knew he had lost the people's trust. For now, the future had been claimed by kindness, not fear. That night, the human sat with her by the fire. Her children had fallen asleep against his side as if he were one of their own. "You've given them more than food or medicine," she said quietly. "You've given them a future." Why us?" He looked into the flames, his face shadowed but calm. "Because once my people were like yours, forgotten, beaten down. We rose because someone believed in us when no one else would. I will not forget that debt, and now I pay it forward." His voice carried the weight of memory, and for the first time she glimpsed the burden he carried. The mother bowed her head, her heart heavy yet filled with new strength. She did not know where this path would lead, whether it would bring peace or invite new dangers, but she knew her family had been chosen for something larger than themselves. Kindness, she realized, was not small. It was the seed from which worlds could grow. As the fire burned low, the human rose and looked out over the sleeping village. "Tomorrow," he whispered, more to himself than to her, "we begin again." And in that quiet moment, under the watch of 2 moons, the future of Koresh shifted forever, born from the simple act of 3 children carrying a stranger's bags.